So to show you how versatile Bombay India inks are, I'm gonna do a spread in my art journal entirely with the India inks. I'm gonna use things like gesso and matte medium as well, of course, but for the actual art, for any color I wanna do, I'm going to use India inks. What I have here is a bunch of books that I got from a couple of thrift stores. I recently found a mixed media artist, Karen Campbell, and she did a series on how to choose good books for an altered book art journal. And originally, I was appalled by the idea of defacing a book just to put art in it, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, okay, well, these books are old, used books that no one wants, that are just gonna sit on a shelf and rot, so I might as well give them a new life. This is just an old book that I picked up. There are lots of old, weathered looking pages, and there are some interesting images that would be really cool for decoupage, I think. I picked up this Alice in Wonderland book. It hurts me to admit that I'm gonna tear this book apart because I so very dearly love Alice. However, again, it was sitting on a shelf, no one wanted it, and this one doesn't have, of course I love Centennial's prints, I love the original prints. However, this has some really fun, interesting art in it that I thought would be really fun to incorporate in an Alice spread. Or in a couple of Alice spreads, because we all know, who am I kidding? There's going to be more than one. And then, to actually alter a book into a journal, I picked up these. Because inside, they have matte pages. They're not glossy. Nice matte pages. There aren't many pages in most of them. They have a nice hardcover. Let us make a journal spread. I have no idea what it's going to be like, but I guess that's the point. We're just going to be creative.
So I started off with one of the techniques that Karen Campbell suggests for journaling in altered books. I used some decorative duct tape to make borders on these pages because it makes the pages thicker and stronger, and it has the added benefit of helping to inform your color scheme if you want it to. By the time I'm done with this journal page, you won't really see any of the duct tape, but this is where the inspiration came from for the theme of the page. There's the scene in Alice in Wonderland where she's in the Garden of Talking Flowers, and they sing All in the Golden Afternoon. And as I was taping, a line from it got stuck in my head, the part where they sing, "You can learn a lot of things from the flowers." So that's going to be my showcase quote for this page. I threw on some white gesso just to knock back the images printed in this book a little. And then, while that was drying, I chose some pages from my other books to use for decoupage. When I found this big image of Alice, I was so happy. I just love it. And I knew I had to incorporate it into a focal image for this page. So I used some golden regular gel medium to stick that down on the page, as well as some pieces of patterned rice paper and book pages just in random order. Since I am trying to use all the techniques I showcased in my India Ink Art Supply Spotlight video, I mixed India ink with my white gesso to make an opaque paint that is sort of a substitute for acrylic paint, and I used it to paint patches of color here and there that were from the color palette in the duct tape, which again, by the end of this you don't really end up being able to see, but oh well. The colors I use on this spread are mostly violet, red violet, tangerine, yellow ochre, and a mixed green color made of green, yellow ochre, and Van Dyke brown. I then used my DIY ink sprays through a few stencils to add some pattern, which worked nicely, though again, I think the only bit of this you're able to see at the end are the green polka dots in the right corner. But art journaling is about having fun in the process, I think, and it's about layering to gain depth of field. So I don't mind that some of the lowest layers end up covered up or not visible by the time I'm done. Next are drips. I used straight ink from the bottle to make drips with violet in the center, red violet next, and tangerine on the outer edges of the pages. Also, tip for making drips, if you know where you want your drip to end, add a drop of liquid where you want the bottom of the drip to be on the page, and then tilt the page upward instead of downward to make it run back toward the top of the page. That way you can control exactly how far down the drip goes instead of leaving it to random chance. I like it both ways, but I really wanted drips near Alice's face without covering her up, which is why I use this technique, so I could get these drips close without worrying about them running over her. I sprayed some of my mixed green spray at the bottom to try and simulate grass, since I was making this page themed around a flower garden, but again, by the end you weren't able to see this either. Next I went in with some inks to do some waterproof watercoloring, and I colored Alice after mixing up skin tone, and I used yellow ochre for her hair and purple for her dress because they were the colors that were in the color scheme I had decided on. Again, sort of informed from the duct tape I used in the beginning. I made her eyes an aqua color, and they're the only blue on this page, just to make them stand out a bit. I decided I was going to put the quote smack in the middle of the page, so I used some paper towel to add some white gesso in the very center so that it would be textured and not so stark, but I'd have a good place that wasn't too busy to use later. Then I decided I wanted to add the flower I created when I was showing how to watercolor using India inks. So I cut it out of the cold press watercolor paper I had painted it on and stuck it down in the top left corner with some regular gel mat. That's why I like this medium in particular for gluing things down. It's thin enough to stick down flimsy rice papers without making bubbles, but it's also thick enough to glue down heavier embellishments like this thick watercolor paper and hold them securely. After that, I decided to create a sort of vignette effect using the violet ink to darken the edges of the page and create more contrast, which is why you end up not being able to see the green grass spray at the bottom. But I definitely like the framed effect much better than before it was there, and this is about when I started getting really excited about this spread. I also decided that now was the time to stamp out the quote across the center since the white gesso had dried. So I used my stamp set and my matte black India ink, as well as my water brush full of violet ink to write out "You can learn a lot of things from the flowers." And I absolutely hated how I had written flowers. Like, it was just terrible. I hadn't planned any of it out, and it had been looking pretty good so far, and then I got to that last word and oh my gosh. So, off camera, I sponged on some more white gesso over the word flowers to get rid of it, again using some paper towel so it would have that texture to it. And while it was drying, I came in with my matte black filled water brush to add some details to the decoupaged elements so they matched the large Alice image a little bit better, just doing some quick choppy outlines over them. Then, to further cover up the word flowers, I tried spraying through some stencils again, but it just wasn't dark enough and I could still see the words really clearly. So I decided to use a sponge dauber instead to directly apply pure purple and green ink, and that worked much better. Again, to tie everything together, once I was done stenciling, I grabbed my matte black water brush and started outlining the flowers very quickly with loose strokes to sort of suggest details in them. I wasn't working too carefully here because I knew that I was eventually going to write attempt number 2 of the word flowers over these. Next, I tossed around some splatters over the pages before I decided, hey, I know I said intricate stamps probably aren't the way to go when stamping with India ink, but I don't care and I'm going to do it anyway. So I grabbed these flower stamps from the Tim Holtz Flower Garden set, slathered them with black ink, and tried to stamp them. It definitely didn't make a clean image, but it did make an interesting sort of grungy effect that I quite liked. So I stamped them around in a few places. And while that dried, I grabbed my dip pen and started to scribble journaling in the empty spaces just to create some more contrast and interest. Mostly, I'm writing here my favorite Alice in Wonderland quotes off the top of my head. Though, of course, you can't really read any of it, it's just for aesthetics. And it made me really happy to recall some of my favorite scenes from the books. And then, finally, I grabbed my white 5M Posca and wrote the word flowers in a nice bold graffiti style over the purple flowers I had stenciled. You could just as easily do this with a brush and some white gesso, or probably even the white India ink, but since that's one of the few colors that I actually don't have, I didn't have that option, though I'm sure it would work just the same. I ended up having to put 2 layers of white Posca just to get the level of opacity I was looking for, and if you used white India ink, you probably would have to do the same. I chose Posca pen as a backup because, as shown in my giant white stuff comparison, Posca pens are in my top 10 as far as coverage goes, and since I'm doing that really thick graffiti style, I wanted a large tip, and I happen to have a large nib white Posca. That's really the only logic that was going on there. As a final step, I did some white mark making around the page and added drop shadows to the stamped letters just to tie more white in elsewhere on the page. Okay, now see this page? Good. Commit it to memory, because this is the last time you will see it this way. So, this is Golden Soft Gel Gloss, and it has been suggested by the internet as a suitable artist-grade substitute for Mod Podge. And I've seen people use it before in mixed media. It's never been a problem. Okay, fine, great. So I globbed it on willy-nilly and started spreading it with the foam brush and this. See this terrible streaking right here? Yeah, I saw it too. So I assumed that one of the flowers that I had stamped with the black ink wasn't dry when I started spreading on the matte medium, and then I had wiped it over the sunflower, which is the sunflower I painted in the waterproof watercolor example in my India Ink Art Supply Showcase video. So there were dark streaks on it. So to fix this, I used a clean foam brush to try and lift that medium off to get rid of the dark streaks. And then I realized it was lifting up not only the white Posca pen I had used for highlights, but also the black India ink I had used to add extra outline details, as well as the India ink I had used to paint the actual flower. I have no idea what is in this soft gloss gel medium, but somehow it reactivates India inks and allows them to be lifted off the paper. Now at this point in my art journal, I was panicking, and I removed it with some paper towel as gently as I possibly could while trying to disrupt the ink as little as possible, but look at this here. Here's a close-up. When I say it removed all the ink it touched, oh my gosh, it removed all of the ink that it touched. It was terrible. I was freaking out. So this was an absolute disaster because I had no idea it was going to happen. That's why these videos are up so late, and why I tweeted that I had a small-scale disaster and the video wasn't going to be on time. On the other side, you'll now see me using a clean foam brush to apply matte Mod Podge because I decided, well, if it was going to also reactivate the India inks, then I guess I needed to find out sooner rather than later. But no, turns out matte Mod Podge is totally fine. No streaking, no lifting, no nothing. I have no idea what happened or why the gloss medium did that to me, but yes, please learn from my mistakes and do not put this on top of India ink unless you want to pull the ink off the page. Which in my India ink showcase video, I did count as a sort of technique or an option, and it's perfectly fine to do as long as you know that that's what's going to happen if you put soft gloss gel medium on top of India inks. So then I had to set to work to fixing all the damage once the page was dry again. I went back in with my black brush pen and rewrote the originally stamped out words because I didn't think I'd be able to line the letters up perfectly to restamp them. And since you could still see parts of the letters pretty clearly, I didn't want to have any sort of weird ghosting effects, so it was just easier to draw them by hand. I put the white Posca highlights in, put another layer of Posca over the beginning of the word flowers to make it white again, since the black smudged over it pretty badly and left grayish black streaks. I touched up the now faded yellow flower in the corner to the best of my ability, repainted in some of the purple flowers that I had stenciled. I redrew the black flowers that I had stamped for the same reason I drew the letters instead of restamping them. I redid all the scribble journaling with my dip pen, this time writing out my frustration at having to do this page over instead of fun Alice in Wonderland quotes. And once that was all redone, I added Mod Podge to that side as well. Off camera, as a final step, I sprayed it with some matte varnish to keep the pages from sticking together, and this India Ink Alice in Wonderland spread is done. So this is the final art journal spread. Even with the giant, let's call it a mishap at the end, I still like it, and I think it really turned out nicely. The only thing I'm bummed about is how badly that black ink smudged over the little rice paper Curiouser and Curiouser Alice in the bottom left-hand corner, since it's now substantially darker than it was originally, but otherwise I think it turned out pretty nicely. Please like this video if you like art journal spreads, and if you like watching me make mistakes. Don't forget to check out my India Ink art supply showcase video if you want a more in-depth explanation of all the techniques I used in this video that revolved around India inks. Subscribe if you want to see more fun and arty content. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Bye!